Many North American subways are defined by the streets that they run under. Chicago has State Street, Toronto has Yonge Street, Philly has Broad Street, and New York has, well, it's New York, there are quite a few. And San Francisco definitely deserves to be up on that list, as the Market Street subway is one of the continent's greatest transit projects. On the upper level, you have almost all the Muni metro lines, funneled into a single corridor, branching out to many streetcar-era neighborhoods. And on the lower level, you have direct access to basically every BART destination, including Oakland, Berkeley, tons of East Bay suburbs, eventually San Jose, and 2 airports. When you combine both services, you can get a train almost every 2 minutes in each direction. It's a joy to watch, especially at Embarcadero, where you can see the trains flying in and out. But we can do more. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This video is the first in a 3-part series where we'll talk about things related to the future of passenger rail projects in the Bay Area. I won't be including the Silicon Valley BART extension or California high-speed rail, since both of those have been talked about quite a lot already. But without further ado, let's get started. So, new subways in San Francisco. It's been a hot topic for ages among transit fans. We recently got the Central Subway on Muni, which, as we all know, was a very well done project that finished on time, had no major structural issues, and is generating a lot of ridership. Caltrain is also hoping to get one going that will link the existing right-of-way to the Salesforce Transit Center, in a project that has now been renamed the Portal. When it gets done, it'll be a triumph, a huge success. But both of those subways are fairly short. A much more ambitious one has been on the cards for decades, and if things had panned out a little bit differently, could have actually been part of the original BART system. It would have branched off the Transbay Tube towards Union Square, continuing under Geary Boulevard until it turns towards the Golden Gate Bridge, runs on the bridge, and onwards into Marin County. The Geary part in particular is sorely missed. The existing 38 and 38R buses that currently use that corridor are among the busiest buses, not just in San Francisco, but the entire North American West Coast. And even before BART was around, Geary was the first major artery to get streetcars, with lines A through D all using Geary in some way. So if you ever wonder why modern Muni Metro starts at J, there's why. So Geary needs a subway, that much is absolutely true. But what kind of places would it need to stop at? The subway would probably start at or near the Salesforce Transit Center and the existing Montgomery station, then head west to Union Square to connect to the T. Further along, something near Van Ness to connect to the BRT line could be very useful, as would stops in Japantown, University of San Francisco, and of course the massive Richmond district. Some proposals, including the latest study being done by the SFCTA, have the subway turn after Park Presidio towards 19th Avenue, working its way under Golden Gate Park towards the Sunset District, SF State, Stonestown, Park Merced, and eventually Daly City BART Station. Just for simplicity though, I'm going to refer to the whole thing as the Geary subway, and this is just the general alignment. The specifics will depend on what kind of trains we use. And that right there is the ever-increasing number of billions dollar question. The way I see it, there are 3 main choices: either existing BART trains, existing Muni trains, or something totally new, maybe using driverless technology. I think all 3 of them have their pros and cons, so let's talk about them one at a time, and in the end, I will offer my preference. It seems like of those options, the BART one is a non-starter, by far the least popular. Though I think some of the arguments that are made against it aren't entirely fair. Now, the obvious appeal of using BART trains would be both the capacity gains and the broader regional connectivity. The former goes without saying, BART trains are just massive. And the latter allows you to take full advantage of what BART is designed for: quick regional travel. You could unlock so many trips from the East Bay to untapped parts of SF that would either be a one-seat ride or at least using only one transit mode. After all, BART transfers are pretty easy. Something that has been touted as a potential issue with the Geary BART subway is the matter of stop spacing. Since BART stations need to be so long, you can't really have them closer together. However, the stations having such a large footprint comes with a hidden perk. If you're tactical with where you place the station exits, then you can artificially increase its catchment area. BART already has many great examples of this. Downtown Berkeley, downtown Oakland, and the Market Street subway all come to mind. As long as you remember which car the train to be in so you're closest to your desired exit, it almost feels like in some cases you're getting 2 stations in one. A bad example would be the Mission stations, which only have exits at one intersection, which really limits their scope in what is a very vibrant cultural area. There's the argument that a Geary subway should be optimized for local trips, if the goal is to get people off the 38 and 38R. This kind of misses the point for me. It's one thing to meet demand and another thing to create new demand that didn't exist at all. A place that suddenly has transit might make it worth visiting all on its own, as would happen with folks in the East Bay who want to use a Geary BART line. Also, a subway shouldn't be viewed as replacing a bus. It should provide a faster alternative for those making longer trips. And BART absolutely succeeds on that front. In this sense, wide stop spacing is a feature, not a bug. However, all of this has one major caveat, the reason why I'm ultimately not the biggest fan of a Geary BART line. If you were to go ahead with this, it absolutely requires a second Transbay tube built to BART gauge, which almost certainly is not happening. Yes, the very first BART plans did have multiple lines in SF, but they all fed out from the same tube, which would have severely limited the frequencies on each individual leg. It's effectively the situation with the Steel Bridge in Portland, but on a much bigger scale. Even with signaling upgrades planned, the current Transbay tube's capacity and efficiency would be greatly impeded with a reverse branch. In a hypothetical world where we did get a new broad gauge Transbay tube, here's what a Geary BART line could look like. The yellow line would split off after MacArthur, potentially starting a new Oakland station, while the green line would split off just after Fruitvale, and meet the yellow line at a stop near Oakland Jack London, before both lines continued to Alameda and down the tube. From there they'd stop at Oracle Park just as they exit the tube, then use the route that we drew earlier with some of the stops that are a little closer together being merged. Daly City would get new underground platforms before the tracks continue to go up towards the yard at Also, under this circumstance, red and blue trains would still use the original subway and would both go past Daly City to Millbrae and SFO respectively. And yes, the purple line will return in this proposal. But yeah, we're not getting a BART Transbay tube, so it's not worth thinking about this too much. So let's talk about the second option now, which is to run existing Muni Metro trains, as in the high-floor Siemens S200s. As far as American light rail vehicles go, it's one of the best, especially when used in the subway. The high-floor design is great, not only for level boarding within subways, but also providing additional capacity now that the wheels aren't in the way. They can also hit 55 miles per hour or 90 kilometers per hour and accelerate pretty quickly. So on performance, they can definitely come close to some modern light metro trains. And with improvements to signaling, you may as well already be there. You also get the added benefit of a tighter station spacing, which could be greatly suited to local trips and hitting more neighborhoods directly. This all seems like a very attractive and probably more cost-effective option than going with BART, though I do have a concern, and it's one that we saw on the Central Subway too. I worry that going with this option would not lead to good future-proofing, if stations are only built to accommodate two-car consists. Although the demand on the T today is nowhere near capacity, largely since it hasn't been built out fully, there is definitely a world where that becomes a problem, and probably even more so on Geary. I would hope that stations are built to fit at least 3-car trains, which you may not need from the get-go, but again, it's good to be prepared for future ridership surges. It should be mentioned, of course, that Muni is already capable of automatic train operation in its subways, and work is underway to enhance a signaling system that would enable higher frequencies. However, the S200s, while being very advanced light rail vehicles, are still built like light rail vehicles, with a narrower loading gauge and not being fully walk-through compared to more modern subway trains, which on a line that will be entirely grade separated maybe needs some adjustment. And that leads us nicely into the third option, which is to use a fully automated light metro technology, something like Bombardier's Zenovia Metro, which of course is famous for its use on the SkyTrain, but is found in many other parts of the world, such as here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Or maybe a derivative of the Alstom Metropolis, like the sets used on the REM or some of the Grand Paris Express lines and all these other places too. Though some of these trains are quite large and wouldn't be really considered light metro anymore, but oh well. Even Hitachi Rail has entered the North American scene in this niche, having been awarded the contract for the Ontario line, and of course just opened the Honolulu Skyline not too long ago. The appeal for something like this is pretty strong. It's a lot easier to run frequent service on a system that's explicitly built to be driverless, and given that this subway likely wouldn't overlap with the existing Muni Metro network anyway, you can easily make it work. You could even take Copenhagen's approach, with super small trains that are able to run just a couple minutes apart, which of course negates the issue from earlier of having to build larger stations to be future-proofed. You'd also get platform screen doors, which is always nice. And most of all, you would solve the problem of using trains that are not designed for automated operation. The S200s are only 2.65 meters wide, which to be fair is the same as most installations of the Hitachi Rail driverless metro. But there are many driverless subway cars around the world that get as wide as even a BART train. Yes, even on standard gauge. But it's not just width, of course. You could also have fully open gangways and eliminate the need for operator cabs, all of which will be helpful to increase capacity. The main downside to this is that Muni would now obviously have a new type of train in their fleet, which would cause complications with maintenance and yard space. If this line was isolated from the rest of Muni, it would need its own yard, and it's not obvious where you would put it. Unless you take Singapore's approach of building a massive underground depot, which would obviously be super cool, but probably not worth it for such a short line. So overall, just to conclude, I think the whole Geary subway discourse kind of shows what people think of San Francisco's transit and what different modes should be doing in their eyes. Like, for example, there are a bunch of people that would want Geary subway to be Muni, and that's because they see Muni as the city's metro system, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but it doesn't really resonate with me because given that the Bay Area is so polycentric and people are going from everywhere to everywhere, I think we should be thinking a lot about what transit projects actually connect to in a broader sense. And with that said, I think what BART does is commonly underestimated, as it really is a perfect blend of frequency, capacity, speed, and reach. All of those I think would be great in terms of adding new destinations to SF's transit. So that's why for the longest time I have been an advocate of a Geary BART line, and I've long maintained that I think that is the best way to do it. However, that was contingent on BART being chosen as the new Transbay 2, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be very likely at this point, and that would pretty much make a Geary BART line completely useless. So with that said, I think we ultimately are in a position where we'll have to consider either using existing Muni Metro trains or something new automated light metro-esque. The former would be much easier because we already have the trains in stock, but would cause issues with capacity potentially, whereas the latter would be really revolutionary and a huge statement of intent, but would pose challenges with maintenance and yard space. So with that said, I think the best solution ultimately at this point is just to meet in the middle somehow. Maybe a new evolution of the S200s that can run driverless and also has some kind of middle car so that you don't have a bunch of redundant cab cars in the middle of trains that take up valuable space for passengers. And there are quite a few examples around the world of things like this, most notably the Rotterdam Metro. I think that is a very good example of what we can strive for. There's also a couple of light metro trains by CRRC that you can find places like Malaysia and Turkey, and Stadler just made an absolutely incredible looking train for a Taiwanware Metro, which isn't driverless, but it really hits the mark for what I would want to see. So Stadler, if you want to do something like that for Geary, I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, ultimately, any rail is better than nothing at all at the end of the day. So as long as something that's moving on this project before the heat death of the universe, I think we would all be pretty happy with that in the end. So that's it for part 1 of my future Bay Area series, but I've still got 2 more parts coming up. It's quite a lot, but I'm really excited to cover it all, so stay tuned, you won't want to miss it.